Alrighty, so it says checking connections. We are now live. Alrighty, so we're gonna get a couple people coming in here. It's just letting people know that we have started this.
Great.
Hi, Sarah. Hello. Hi, Hoff. Hello, Elizabeth. We're going to go ahead and get started in a couple of minutes, just so that you guys know you are on Garcia Online, the corporate diary. Hi, Sarah. Hello, thanks for the hearts. Krista, you are joined with Garcia and Julia Rudlin. Veronica is in the house, joining us from Montreal. Charlotte is in San Francisco. I'm in New York City. Julia, you're in New York. You're in SF, right?
So I'm actually in New York, in Brooklyn.
Oh wow, that's awesome! Yay! Okay, that's great. Okay, cool. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and get started and kick things off. I want to be conscious of your time and everyone's time. So, wow. First of all, welcome to the Corporate Diary. The Corporate Diary, just so you know, is a video series. It's also a blog series where I interview women in male-dominated fields and talk about what it's like to be a woman, specifically in the business world, and tackling a lot of challenges, but also what success is like from that female lens. So I also will chat about what it's like to be a woman in business myself, having come from management consulting and currently in corporate venture capital and in a growth role in an incubation firm. So wanted to chat with you. Julia is amazing. She is not only the director of growth at Terminal, and correct me if I'm wrong, Terminal is the world's first tech-enabled platform supporting remote engineering teams.
Yeah, we're like HQ2 as a service. You nailed it.
Awesome. Okay. And you've also had a fair bit of experience in venture capital. You were a mentor at First Round Capital. You were also leading platform at First Mark Capital, and you were the head of growth at Vine.
Yeah, RIP.
Super cool. So my first question is actually about growth, and selfishly, I want to understand, what does growth mean to you? Because when you come across growth in certain companies in that role, it can mean a variety of different things. So what does growth mean, or when you think about your own day-to-day tasks, what is growth?
Yeah, so growth can mean a ton of different things, whether it's performance marketing, BD, sales, product. It can be a combination of things. So my role has really been exactly that, a combination of marketing, growth marketing, BD, and sales. Ultimately, all it really means is that you're responsible for growing users, revenue, whatever your metrics are for the business, in whatever capacity that means. So yeah, my day-to-day today really consists of a lot of BD and sales, as well as a lot of marketing tactics to get Terminal's name out there, and ultimately being able to convert people, interested parties, into paying customers and clients.
Amazing. Yeah. So it's got an element of BD, an element of analytics as well, content platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think basically whatever is required to just move the needle in terms of if you're, a pre-product or a pre-revenue product, then it's probably more about users and downloads and things like that, especially if you're a consumer content platform. But for me right now, we are a revenue generating product. So it's a matter of just doing what we can, figuring out how we increase revenue through paying customers and other types of revenue streams.
Wow. Amazing. Okay, great. And something that I was thinking about when I was looking through your achievements is this question of content platforms. And when you were at, for example, Vine, there's this element of growth from a brand perspective, but also user acquisition. And users themselves are almost acting like brands because they want to get followers. They want to have their content go viral, and they're almost tracking their own content as if they were these mini enterprises. So a lot of people, when they think about content platforms for themselves, are wondering, how can I make my content more appealing, or how can, and I don't want to use the word viral because that's just, it's like asking, no growth marketer wants to be asked, how do I go viral? But when it comes to ways to win and how to play in that space, are there any tips or tricks for brands or for users?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting was that, that was really my job at Vine to, so I was leading global growth, basically responsible for increasing the number of users, usage, and downloads of the app in all the countries outside of the US. And so it was really, just like you mentioned, a branding exercise of making sure that Vine translated quite literally into other markets. And so it was an exercise of figuring out, what does Vine mean to users in the US? Ultimately, Vine was a place where people could come and escape and watch really funny content. So what does funny mean? What is funny content in the UK or in Canada or in Japan? Can those international users come to the app and see something that resonates with them, and that is ultimately, comedy and things like that. And so, on top of that, Vine was really nascent in a lot of markets. You could argue that it was in the US as well. And so my job was figuring out what new verticals could we bring to the platform. And so, part of that was gaming wasn't really that big on Vine at the time. Cooking was still pretty nascent. You needed more than 6 seconds to be able to walk through a recipe. How could we figure out ways to cater to those new types of demographics and bring them onto the platform? And just like you mentioned, a lot of my job was also working with influencers and Viners in the different markets in those different countries as well. And at the time, Instagram had launched video, Snapchat was on the rise. We were competing against Musical.ly as well, and all these other platforms had incredible tools, and they were extremely fun. And Vine was still a very weird platform. It was hard to understand what content did well. There weren't that many users compared to Instagram. So, these big names on Instagram would check out Vine and not see the numbers or the likes, just as they would on their Instagram followings or their YouTube pages. And so ultimately, the argument of using Vine was, you need another platform to cross promote and cross post your content that you've worked so hard to create for YouTube and Instagram. You might as well just add it to another platform for free and, just extract all of the value out of that piece of content that you can. The other thing is, like, smaller platforms, like at the moment, you're probably not going to be able to be a new user crushing it on YouTube. But the likelihood of you going to a platform that's still nascent and seeing a little bit of a following, Byte, for example, is a good one to keep an eye out for. Building your user base and building your audience base on a platform like Byte, getting really popular, and then transferring your audience to a larger platform like YouTube, like Instagram, where you can then monetize those efforts of the content that you created on these other smaller platforms, I think is a really great strategy. So I definitely, look at some of the examples that you see on Vine, David Dobrik, Lele Pons, King Batch, like all of these guys got big on Vine and then eventually transferred to YouTube and now Netflix or wherever they are. So, definitely, as well as that TikTok girl, the kombucha girl, I think that's a great example of her using a still nascent platform and getting really popular and big. And I think ultimately when you're thinking about your content, just be authentic. That's what resonates.
Absolutely. Yeah. When it comes to, you mentioned Byte, it's interesting because you see, for example, David, he moved from Vine to, he's always been in different spaces. So you can find him on YouTube. He's huge on TikTok, and even Kourtney Kardashian is like, oh, let me see if I can chat with David and have him show my son how to use TikTok. So you kind of see these influencers, these content influencers, that are not really specific to one platform. They're kind of like playing the game in a variety of different spaces to gather audiences, but trying to create and distribute according to each platform, right? So TikTok is still very different from YouTube and what you can do, but finding ways to speak that language? If your brand is comedy, how can you speak the language of that platform as well as your own brand? It's super interesting.
It's a great point.
Yeah. And when you moved from, so you were head of growth at Vine for some time, and then you moved into VC, is that correct?
Yeah.
What kind of brought you to make that decision?
Yeah, so when Vine shut down, I was looking for, different opportunities, and I ended up just out of, my network and by chance connecting with a few different VCs. And ultimately, I ended up at First Mark Capital, and what really drove me to the role, the platform role, was that these venture capital firms, they offer money, obviously, to help build and scale companies. But there's a lot of different ways now to raise capital. You've got ICOs, you've got crowdfunding, angel investors, and many other ways of generating capital. So at the end of the day, VCs need a way to provide value outside of just pure money. And so, as I'm sure you're very well aware of, a lot of these VC firms are now offering what they call platform services, which is essentially non-monetary support and different ways for them to help their companies, once they've invested, continue to scale and grow. So, if you're a big name like Andreessen, Kleiner Perkins, et cetera, if you get invested, if they are your investors, you benefit from all of the wonderful events and community and the strong network that they have from their name and their past successes and investments and things like that. At First Mark, what I thought was really interesting was that they were trying to build a way to scale help. So essentially, I was hired to build out the products and the tools and a platform, like a true online platform, and a portal for our companies to come into and be able to find and self-service, find ways, content, community strategies, different tools to help themselves scale from there. And so I think a theme across all of my roles is just, about finding roles where I can start from scratch and build something and help, other people scale and grow from there. And so I found that approach really interesting, really scalable. And so I ended up joining the firm.
That's amazing. Wow. I guess this question is veering a little bit away from roles, like specific roles and experiences that you've had, and a little bit more about the psychology. But VC is such a male-dominated space, as well as technical platforms and tech, right? So when you kind of think about being a woman in that space, how has that helped you, or what kind of challenges have you faced? So the pros and cons of being a woman in that space.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for me to pinpoint, what's hard or what's a pro or whatever, because this is the only life I know, right? I think that as someone, especially as someone junior, I look quite young. I'm also female. And I think those things have made me need to work harder. Definitely need to prepare more than some of my, male older counterparts. I've definitely been in a situation where there have been, gray-haired men at the table, and I've not been taken seriously. And so it's that much more important for me to come into the meeting strong, with the right tone, the right things to say, preempt, and prepare for any questions that can come your way. And I think the more prepared you are to answer those questions, to ask smart questions back, to make great points, it is extra work that you need to do up front in order to prepare for some of those meetings, but I think it's definitely worth it. I definitely recommend seeking mentors, both female and male. I think it's really important to understand that, right now there are a lot of men in really powerful positions. And, while having a female mentor is a wonderful thing, and I definitely recommend that, it's really helpful to align yourself with the men that are in those positions so that one day you can also level up into that role. And ultimately, network is what counts. And so if there are men in those roles, you need to be part of that network for you to be considered as, to be considered for some of the roles that you might be not thought of right now. So it's really important to, I think, have a blend of both male and female mentors in your network.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And also from like a statistical standpoint, I've read a lot of articles that have talked about mentorship and how you really need both in order to succeed, because there are different levels of power, and the more you diversify and seek a perspective of and differences of opinions, the more you're able to be supported. And at the end of the day, you know, from a networking standpoint, it's just very, very important.
Yeah.
Also, you touched upon something that was really interesting in terms of when you go into a room, like you definitely need to be overly prepared, and sometimes more so than your male colleagues. Have you ever, the thing that I like about growth though, is that it is quite analytical, because you can always go back to these content platforms, and they're nascent, right? So I don't know if you play around with platforms themselves to kind of understand how they work and the psychology behind the user acquisition, and understand how brands and how people themselves would want to use these platforms that maybe other generations and other people may not be able to truly understand like you, because of your psychographics. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think being a woman in, you know, roles where you have analytics to back up your success is really helpful, because at the end of the day, numbers don't lie, right? So whether that's sales or growth or performance marketing, I think those roles are wonderful. You know, to be able to just point to, well, I did this thing and it resulted in X%, or, you know, whatever number of scale. So there's really no argument there. You can't, you know, you can directly pinpoint your success against your teammates, whether they're male or female, or, you know, whatever the background they are. I also think that, yeah, I think that, you know, as a, I don't know how to phrase this, but yeah, I guess I'll just stop there and wait for your next question.
What kind of advice would you give to people that are looking to be either a growth architect, or join VC tech? What kind, or just professional advice? What would be one lesson or one piece of advice that you've taken with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really value networks and I value communities. And so, as much as you can, you know, I'm sure everyone has a little bit of extra time right now. Invest in those relationships, invest in networking. It still happens over Zoom, if not more right now. There are a ton of great Slack communities and other types of communities, you know, whether it's within the industry that you're currently in or the one that you want to be in. Meet those people, because, you know, the next time that there's a job opening, the first thing that someone thinks of is, oh, who do I know that could be great for this role? And so if you're not in that person's network, you're just not going to be considered. And that's really how everything works, from junior roles through to even board roles, especially at some of those more senior roles that never really get posted and shown publicly. So it's really important to build your, you know, build your network and build those relationships. And again, whether that's through networking or if you're seeking a mentor, I highly recommend that. If you're a junior in your career, it's even more important. These people will continue to grow with you and guide you through the rest of your career. And I guess on the topic of being junior, you know, the willingness and eagerness to learn and learn quickly is really important. You can get away with not really knowing that many things or having that many hard skills. And so take advantage of that. You know, your eagerness and willing to learn is really your number one selling point. And there are many other people above you that are willing to teach you, as long as you're, you know, a good student and can learn and execute quickly. So take advantage of that.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you a final question, and I'm debating which one. I think it would just be maybe your mantra. If we're on the topic of professional career advice, maybe a life mantra that has shaped just you as a person.
I wish I had something wonderful to say to you. I don't really have one. I think just, again, like, you know, simplify everything. Just remember, like, what are you here to do in this meeting? You want to, you know, whether it's you want to close a client, or you want to leave with a mentor, or you want that job opportunity, or you want this person to, you know, keep you in mind the next time, you know, a cool opportunity comes up. Just always remember, like, the the premise, like remember the brief of what you're doing. And I think that that has always helped me.
That's great. That is very wise.
What's yours? Do you have a mantra?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this one quite recently, because I remember I asked this on the first corporate diary live that I did on Monday, and I was like, why did I ask this if I don't even know mine? And I was asked back, and I was like, okay. Luckily, I was chatting with a friend about motivation, like Monday, hashtag Monday motivation, and I shared with him how I've taken this poem that was shared with me. I used to be an actress. So like for 10 years, I was a television actress. And at my breaking point where I was kind of like, am I going to go into business, or am I going to stay in the acting industry? I met this main actress, like she was a main character. We were talking about my statistical analysis homework that I had. And you know, we were talking about, oh, I wish. And I said, I wish, because she was like, I wish that I had a hobby. And I'm like, well, it's not a hobby, it's an education. And I said, oh, I wish that I was in your shoes, where, you know, my life would be a little bit simpler, and I don't have to make this decision of whether or not I have to, if I'm going to stay in the acting industry or if I'm going to go into business. I wish I had the reputation that you have. Guys, I think oh, hello.
You're back.
I'm back. Okay. I've been having some technical issues with my internet. I apologize. Long story short, she showed me this poem, and it was pretty much just to say that you are who you are and you cannot fight that. You need to be able to accept where you are in your life and let life live through you. So it's a combination of working hard, being ambitious, but also not fighting against the current, and accepting what comes your way and working with it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think there's only so much control you can have, which is why I always focus on prepare. You know, you need to do as much as you can to tee yourself up for a good, you know, solid opportunity, and, you know, for a good meeting to happen. But ultimately, there are just some things that, whether it's luck or timing or whatever it might be, it might not work out. But all you really can do is do your best and set yourself up for success like that. So I love that that's your mantra.
Yeah, thank you. I do have one final question. It's just because I'm curious.
Yeah.
So somebody in the chat was asking, how do I follow Julia? Like, what's her page? How do I like link up? And
Yeah.
I know that you're not on Instagram. Is there a reason for why you're not on a lot of social media platforms when your job is like growth?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. For me, Instagram, you know, I loved it when it was just a photo sharing platform and everyone was posting really irrelevant photos that were kind of terrible. And that was so fun for me. And it was like during this turn of, you know, like it started turning into something more vain. And there was just this obsession that started building with the platform. And I started realizing, like, every time I was scrolling through Instagram, if you had asked me what I just looked at, I could not tell you. And I just felt like that was probably terrible for, you know, for my brain, for everything. And so it just didn't really feel that productive. I wasn't really gaining any happiness from it. Meanwhile, you know, Pinterest is just like my wonderful happy portal into the internet and into the world of pictures. So I highly recommend Pinterest. But that's really why I'm not on Instagram or TikTok or any of those other platforms, but I will happily talk about them all day.
Amazing. Yeah, that's what I figured. Cause yeah, I remember I was working with on a venture, because so at my company, we build and scale ventures. And so the scaling portion can sometimes be very tactical, where I was helping a venture scale through their Instagram. And I thought, wow, I'm doing this for my job and I don't want to look at Instagram now for myself because,
Yeah.
you know, it just kind of takes over your life and it becomes so business driven and platform driven versus it being like a fun social thing, right? So
Right.
I was getting caught up in the numbers and I thought, okay, for a couple months, I'll just shut off personally. And once I'm done with this venture, then I'll be back.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for joining, Julia. I'm going to turn these guys off. Everybody on IG Live, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to say goodbye here. Julia, if you can stay on, I just want to thank you so much again. All right, everybody, I'm going to end this call and I'm going to post this on IGTV so you will have access to the video. Thank you. And now I'm going to download this. I always forget to download it.
All your hard work.
Yeah, and then I'm just like screen recording for hours. Awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah. Oh, let me just stop the recording. Sorry.